They laughed when he flapped his hands. They mocked the way he counted his lunch items. And when they shoved him into the closet, they thought no one would care. But someone did. 30 years on the force had taught Captain David Williams how to track a threat, and this time, the case was personal. He walked into Lincoln High the next day with his badge, evidence, and a quiet fury. Because that notebook they trampled? That was his nephew's universe, and someone was about to answer for every page. If you believe silence should never be the price of safety, like this video, and type "justice" in the comments. Some kids aren't weak, they're just waiting for someone to stand beside them. Marcus Williams sat at his usual table in the corner of Lincoln High's cafeteria, methodically arranging his lunch into precise sections. The turkey sandwich cut into perfect triangles, apple slices fanned out in descending size order, and his chocolate milk positioned exactly 2 inches from the right edge of his tray. To most students, it looked obsessive. To Marcus, it was survival. Autism meant the world came at him differently, louder, brighter, more overwhelming, but routines kept the chaos at bay. Same seat, same lunch, same careful arrangement every day for 3 years. The other kids had learned to ignore him, which was exactly how he preferred it. At 15, Marcus was tall for his age but thin, with dark hair that never quite laid flat and thick-rimmed glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. His backpack sat beside him, packed with colored pens organized by shade intensity and notebooks labeled with military precision. Everything had its place. Everything had its purpose. His Uncle David had taught him that. "Order brings peace, Marcus," he'd say during their quiet Sunday dinners. "When the world gets too loud, you build yourself a quiet corner." David understood. Not because he was autistic, but because he'd seen enough chaos in his 30-year career to know the value of calm. Marcus pulled out his astronomy notebook and began sketching the constellation patterns he'd memorized the night before. The cafeteria noise faded to a manageable hum as he focused on the precise angles of Cassiopeia. Numbers and patterns made sense. They followed rules. They didn't change their minds or speak in riddles or laugh at things that weren't funny. 3 tables over, Tyler Morrison cracked his knuckles and nodded toward Marcus's corner. Tyler was everything Marcus wasn't: loud, unpredictable, and hungry for attention. At 17, he'd been held back twice and wore his failures like armor. If he couldn't be smart, he'd be feared. "Look at Rain Man over there," Tyler muttered to his 2 loyal followers, Jake and Connor. "Still playing with his little drawings." Jake snickered, but Connor shifted uncomfortably. He'd been in Marcus's chemistry class freshman year. The kid was brilliant, just different. "Leave him alone, Tyler," Connor said quietly. "He's not bothering anyone." Tyler's eyes narrowed. "You defending the freak now?" The word hung in the air like a challenge. Connor looked away, and Tyler's smirk widened. Fear was a language he spoke fluently. "I'm just saying," Connor started. "You're just saying nothing," Tyler cut him off. "Unless you want to sit with him from now on." The threat was clear. In the brutal ecosystem of high school, Tyler Morrison was an apex predator. Cross him, and you became prey. Connor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Self-preservation trumped conscience. Tyler had counted on that. Across the cafeteria, Marcus continued sketching, unaware of the attention. His world had narrowed to the careful lines of his pencil and the familiar patterns taking shape on paper. The constellation of Perseus, the hero who saved Andromeda. Marcus had always liked that story, the quiet boy who became something more when it mattered most. The bell rang, and students began filing out in their usual chaotic waves. Marcus packed his notebook with the same methodical care he'd used to arrange his lunch. Everything in its proper place, everything secure. He shouldered his backpack and headed for the exit, keeping his eyes down and following the same path he'd taken for 3 years. The hallways were a sensory nightmare. Slamming lockers, shouting voices, the squeak of sneakers on linoleum. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, breathing slowly through his nose. Uncle David had taught him that too. When the world gets overwhelming, you find your center. Breathe, focus, you're stronger than you know. He was almost to his locker when Tyler stepped into his path. "Hey, Marcus," Tyler said, his voice deceptively friendly. "Nice drawings in there. For a kindergartner." Marcus's hands tightened on his backpack straps. He could feel the familiar flush of anxiety rising in his chest. "I need to get to class," he said quietly, trying to step around Tyler. Jake moved to block him on the left. Connor reluctantly took the right. Marcus was trapped in a triangle of malice, his carefully ordered world suddenly spinning out of control. "What's the rush?" Tyler asked, stepping closer. "We're just being friendly, right guys?" "Right," Jake echoed, but Connor remained silent. Marcus's breathing grew shallow. The hallway noise seemed to amplify, every sound hitting his ears like a physical blow. His hands began to shake slightly, a stim he'd learned to suppress but couldn't quite control under stress. "Look at that," Tyler said, noticing the tremor. "Little Marcus is scared." "What are you going to do? Cry for your mommy?" The words hit like a slap. Marcus's mother had died when he was 7. It was something Tyler knew, something half the school knew. The cruelty was intentional, calculated to wound. "Leave me alone," Marcus whispered, but his voice cracked on the words. The harder he tried to stay calm, the more his body betrayed him. His hands flapped once, twice, a self-soothing gesture that felt as involuntary as breathing. Tyler's eyes lit up with cruel delight. "Oh, what's this? Some kind of bird dance?" He mimicked Marcus's movements, exaggerating them into a mockery. "Tweet, tweet, little birdie," Jake laughed loudly, drawing more attention. A small crowd began to form, phones appearing like vultures circling prey. In the age of social media, humiliation was currency, and Tyler was about to make a withdrawal. "Stop," Marcus said, louder now, but his voice still shook. "Just stop." "Stop what?" Tyler asked innocently. "I'm just having fun. You like fun, don't you, Marcus?" The crowd pressed closer. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, their whispers cutting through his defenses. The hallway seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. Everything was too bright, too loud, too much. "Dance for us again," Tyler demanded. "Come on, show everyone your special moves." Marcus's breathing became rapid, shallow, his vision tunneled. Uncle David had warned him about this, the moment when the world became too much, and the only choice was fight or flight. But Marcus had never been a fighter, and there was nowhere to run. "I said dance!" Tyler shoved Marcus hard against the lockers. The metal handle bit into his shoulder blade, and his carefully organized backpack spilled open. Notebooks scattered across the hallway floor, their pristine pages now trampled by careless feet. Marcus dropped to his knees, frantically trying to gather his scattered belongings. His astronomy notebook lay open, the constellation of Perseus torn and dirty. 3 years of careful work destroyed in seconds. "Oops," Tyler said with mock sympathy. "Looks like your little drawings got messed up. Maybe you should be more careful." Something inside Marcus snapped, not into anger. He'd never been angry like other kids. It snapped into something deeper, darker, into the place where fear lived alongside a desperate need for the pain to stop. "Please," he whispered, clutching his ruined notebook. "Just leave me alone." "What did you say?" Tyler leaned down, cupping his ear theatrically. "I can't hear you over all that sniveling." The crowd laughed. Phones recorded. Marcus felt himself disappearing, becoming nothing more than content for their entertainment. He closed his eyes and tried to find his center, tried to remember Uncle David's voice telling him he was stronger than he knew. But he'd never felt weaker. From the science wing, Mrs. Peterson watched the scene unfold with growing horror. She'd been teaching for 23 years, had seen her share of bullying, but this felt different, more vicious, more personal. She started toward the crowd, but Tyler's voice stopped her cold. "You know what, Marcus? I think you need to learn some respect." He grabbed Marcus by the shirt collar, hauling him to his feet. "Maybe a little trip to the janitor's closet will teach you some manners." Mrs. Peterson's blood chilled. The janitor's closet was isolated, away from cameras and witnesses. She'd heard rumors about what happened to kids who were dragged there, but administration always claimed there was no proof. She fumbled for her phone, fingers shaking as she tried to dial the office, but Tyler was already moving, his grip tight on Marcus's shirt as he began dragging him down the hallway. "No," Marcus said, louder now, panic giving strength to his voice. "No, I don't want to go. I don't want to—" "Shut up," Tyler hissed. "You're going, and you're going to like it." Mrs. Peterson ran after them, but Tyler's followers blocked her path. "Sorry, Mrs. P," Jake said with a smirk. private party. By the time she pushed through, they were gone. The hallway was empty except for Marcus's scattered notebooks and the lingering smell of fear. Marcus sat in the nurse's office 2 hours later, his shirt torn and his glasses cracked. The janitor's closet had been dark, cramped, and filled with the sharp smell of chemicals. Tyler and his friends had left him there, promising worse if he told anyone what happened. It was just an accident, Marcus repeated to Principal Harrison for the third time. I fell down the stairs. Principal Harrison's expression was skeptical, but without witnesses or proof, his hands were tied. Marcus, if someone hurt you, you need to tell me. I can't help if you don't tell me the truth. But Marcus had learned long ago that truth was a luxury he couldn't afford. The truth would make things worse. The truth would paint a target on his back that would never fade. I fell, he said again, his voice flat and emotionless. Can I go home now? The principal sighed. I'll call your uncle. Uncle David arrived within 20 minutes, his face carefully neutral as he surveyed Marcus's injuries. He didn't ask questions in front of the principal, didn't demand explanations. He simply signed the papers and helped Marcus to his car. They drove in silence for several minutes before David finally spoke. You want to tell me what really happened? Marcus stared out the window at the passing houses, each one containing families that probably sat around dinner tables and talked about their days. Normal families, uncomplicated families. I fell, he said quietly. David's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, but his voice remained calm. Okay, but if you change your mind, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. You know that, right? Marcus nodded, but didn't speak. How could he explain that talking would only make things worse? That tomorrow would bring fresh humiliation, that Tyler Morrison was just getting started? That night, Marcus sat in his room arranging and rearranging his remaining school supplies. The ritual was soothing, familiar. Each pencil in its designated slot, each notebook aligned with military precision, order from chaos. But his hands shook as he worked, and twice he had to start over when tears blurred his vision. The Constellation notebook was ruined, 3 years of careful work destroyed in minutes. He'd started a new one, but the pages felt foreign, empty. Downstairs, Uncle David sat at his kitchen table, still wearing his off-duty clothes. He'd been Captain David Williams of the Metro Police Department for 8 years, but tonight he felt as helpless as a rookie on his first day. His phone buzzed with a text from his partner, Detective Sarah Chen. Heard about Marcus, you okay? David stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, working on it. He had resources most uncles didn't, connections, authority, the ability to make things happen with a single phone call. But Marcus had asked him to stay out of it, had begged him not to make it worse. David understood that fear. He'd seen what happened to kids who were labeled as snitches, who had family members in law enforcement. The bullying often escalated before it got better. But he also understood something else. He'd spent 3 decades watching predators operate, and Tyler Morrison had all the markers. This wasn't going to stop. It was going to get worse. The next morning, David put on his uniform with extra care. The badge felt heavier than usual, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like armor. He'd made his decision during a sleepless night, and now it was time to act. His first stop was Lincoln High School, but not to see Marcus. He parked across the street and watched the morning routine unfold. Students streaming in, teachers arriving with coffee and tired smiles, the normal rhythm of education beginning another day. He spotted Tyler Morrison immediately. The kid moved like he owned the place, his 2 followers trailing behind like loyal dogs. David had seen that swagger before, in gang members, in repeat offenders, in anyone who believed they were untouchable. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Sarah, I need a favor. Can you run a background check on Tyler Morrison, age 17, Lincoln High School? Personal or professional? Detective Chen asked. Both, David said quietly. And Sarah, keep this between us for now. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed with the results. Tyler Morrison had a juvenile record, sealed but not invisible to someone with David's clearance. Assault at age 14, vandalism at 15, a pattern of escalating aggression that the system had failed to address. More importantly, Tyler's father was also in the system, Richard Morrison, multiple arrests for domestic violence, currently serving 18 months for aggravated assault. The apple, it seemed, hadn't fallen far from the tree. David walked into Lincoln High School at 10:30 a.m., his uniform crisp and his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The secretary's eyes widened as he approached the front desk. "I'm Captain Williams," he said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in law enforcement. "I need to speak with Principal Harrison immediately." "Is there a problem, Captain?" the secretary asked nervously. "There's about to be," David replied. Principal Harrison appeared within minutes, clearly flustered by the unexpected visit. "Captain Williams, what can I do for you?" "We need to discuss student safety," David said. "Specifically, the safety of my nephew, Marcus Williams." Harrison's face went pale. "Captain, I assure you we take all reports of bullying very seriously. If Marcus has filed a complaint—" "He hasn't," David interrupted, "because he's too afraid to speak up, but I'm not." He pulled out his phone and showed Harrison a series of photos, screenshots from social media posts showing Marcus being humiliated in the hallway. "These were posted yesterday. The internet is forever, Principal Harrison. This boy's humiliation is now permanent." Harrison studied the images, his face growing more troubled with each swipe. I wasn't aware of these posts. We'll look into it immediately." "You'll do more than look into it," David said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You'll fix it. Today." Tyler Morrison was called to the principal's office at 11:15 a.m. He swaggered in with his usual confidence, expecting another meaningless lecture about his attitude or his grades. Instead, he found Principal Harrison sitting behind his desk with a man in a police uniform. "Tyler, this is Captain Williams," Harrison said, his voice carefully neutral. "He'd like to speak with you about yesterday's incident." Tyler's confidence flickered, but he recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything." David studied the boy for a long moment, taking in the defensive posture, the quick shift of his eyes, the way his hands clenched into fists, classic signs of someone who'd been caught and was calculating his next move. "Tyler, I've been a police officer for 30 years, David said quietly. "I've seen every kind of predator there is. You want to know what they all have in common?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably but didn't answer. "They prey on the vulnerable. They pick targets who can't fight back. They think they're untouchable." David leaned forward slightly. "They're always wrong." "I don't know what you think I did," Tyler said, but his voice lacked its usual bravado. David pulled out his phone and showed Tyler the same social media posts he'd shown Harrison. "These show you assaulting my nephew. That's battery, Tyler, a criminal offense." Tyler's face went white. "It was just joking around. No big deal." "No big deal?" David's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "Let me explain something to you, son. Marcus Williams is under my protection. He's family, and nobody, and I mean nobody, hurts my family." 3 days later, Lincoln High School felt different. Tyler Morrison had been suspended pending a full investigation, and his followers had suddenly developed a strong interest in avoiding Marcus entirely. The social media posts had been taken down, and the school had implemented a zero-tolerance policy for cyberbullying. Marcus sat in his usual corner of the cafeteria, but his posture was straighter now. His lunch was still arranged with precise care, but he looked up occasionally, meeting the eyes of classmates who nodded respectfully as they passed. Mrs. Peterson stopped by his table during lunch. "How are you doing, Marcus?" "Better," he said, and meant it. "Uncle David says sometimes the quiet ones are the strongest." She smiled. "Your uncle sounds like a wise man." "He is," Marcus agreed. "He taught me that everyone deserves respect, and that real strength comes from protecting people who can't protect themselves." At the police station across town, David Williams finished his paperwork and prepared to head home. The Tyler Morrison case was closed. The boy had been charged with assault and was facing both criminal and civil consequences. His father's arrest record had been a factor in the judge's decision to deny bail, but more importantly, the culture at Lincoln High was changing. Other students had come forward with their own stories of bullying, and the administration was finally taking action. Sometimes it took a crisis to force real change. David's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Uncle David, I got an A on my astronomy project. The teacher said my constellation drawings were the best she'd ever seen. David smiled as he typed back, I'm proud of you, Marcus. You're stronger than you know. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was the kind of evening that made you believe in new beginnings, in the possibility that tomorrow could be better than today. And for Marcus Williams, it finally was. If you believe every child deserves to feel safe at school, type PROTECT in the comments and subscribe for more stories about standing up for those who need it most. Because sometimes the quiet ones are the strongest of all.